The airplane hummed softly as it moved through the pale morning sky. Most of the passengers had settled into quiet routines. Some were reading newspapers. Some were resting with their eyes closed. Others simply stared out the window, watching clouds drift slowly below like endless white fields. In seat 14A sat Daniel Carter, a broad-shouldered man in his late 30s. His light brown hair was slightly messy, as if he had rushed out the door that morning. His green t-shirt and worn blue jeans made him look more like a construction worker than someone flying across the country. Daniel was a single father. Back home in Ohio, his 9-year-old son Lucas was staying with Daniel's older sister for the weekend. Daniel had taken this trip to attend a short training course for a new job opportunity. Life had not been easy since Lucas's mother passed away 3 years earlier. But Daniel carried himself with quiet strength, the kind that comes from waking up every morning knowing someone small is counting on you. He was looking through a small notebook where he had written reminders for Lucas. Eat your vegetables. Finish your homework. Remember Dad loves you. Daniel smiled softly to himself. Across the aisle, in seat 14C, sat a woman who looked completely different from Daniel's simple world. Her name was Margaret Whitmore. She was in her early 50s. Her chestnut hair was neatly styled, and she wore an elegant cream blouse with a soft silk scarf around her neck. A delicate gold watch rested on her wrist. Even the way she sat, calm, composed, almost distant, suggested a life of great responsibility. Few people on the plane realized who she was. Margaret Whitmore was the founder and CEO of a global technology company worth billions of dollars. But at that moment, she did not look powerful. She looked tired. The flight had been long already. Margaret had been traveling non-stop for weeks, meetings, conferences, interviews. Her schedule rarely allowed space for simple quiet. As the plane cruised above the clouds, she leaned her head back and closed her eyes. At first, it seemed like ordinary fatigue. But a few minutes later, something changed. Her breathing grew shallow. Her hand slowly gripped the armrest. Then her head tilted back in a way that did not look natural. Daniel noticed immediately. Years ago, before life had taken its difficult turns, Daniel had worked as a volunteer EMT in his small town. It was something he had done on weekends, helping neighbors during emergencies. Old instincts never really leave you. He leaned slightly closer. "Ma'am," he said gently. Margaret didn't answer. Her lips had lost color. The flight attendants were still busy several rows ahead, unaware of what was happening. Daniel didn't hesitate. He quickly unfastened his seatbelt and knelt beside her seat. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" he asked again, his voice calm but firm. A few nearby passengers turned their heads. Margaret's eyes fluttered slightly, but she looked dizzy and confused. Daniel gently lifted her arm, checking her pulse. It was weak. "Excuse me," he called toward the aisle. "We may need some help over here." A flight attendant hurried over. "What's going on?" "She may be having a severe blood sugar drop," Daniel said calmly. "Or possibly dehydration. Do you have the emergency medical kit?" The attendant looked surprised but quickly nodded. Within seconds, the small emergency kit was in Daniel's hands. Passengers watched quietly now. Daniel worked with steady hands, the way he had years ago during ambulance calls on quiet country roads. He spoke softly to Margaret. "You're going to be okay. Just breathe slowly." He helped her sip a small amount of juice from the kit, careful not to rush her. Minutes passed slowly. Then color began returning to her face. Margaret blinked, her eyes slowly focusing. The first thing she saw was Daniel's concerned expression. "You helped me," she whispered weakly. Daniel smiled gently. "Just doing what anyone should do." The tension in the cabin slowly faded. People relaxed again. A few passengers quietly nodded in appreciation. The flight attendant looked relieved. "You may have saved her," she said softly. Daniel shrugged a little, almost embarrassed by the attention. "Sometimes people just need a moment," he replied. Margaret sat upright now, still weak but recovering. She studied Daniel for a moment, the simple clothes, the kind eyes, the quiet humility. "Thank you," she said sincerely. Daniel gave a small nod. "My son always says helping people is the fastest way to make the world less scary," he said. Margaret smiled faintly. "Your son sounds wise." Daniel chuckled softly. "He's 9. Most of his wisdom involves pizza and cartoons." They both laughed quietly. The plane continued through the peaceful sky. For a while, they spoke gently about simple things, families, small towns, childhood memories. Margaret told Daniel that she had grown up in a modest neighborhood in Chicago. "My father used to say something," she said thoughtfully. "What was that?" Daniel asked. "He said success doesn't mean much if you forget how to be kind." Daniel nodded. "My dad used to say something similar," he replied. The conversation felt easy. Natural. Two strangers sharing a quiet moment above the clouds. Eventually the captain announced the beginning of descent. Passengers began gathering their belongings. Daniel checked his watch. "I better get ready," he said. Margaret turned toward him. "I would like to thank you properly," she said. "Perhaps dinner sometime?" Daniel smiled politely. "That's kind of you, but I should get home to my boy as soon as possible." Margaret hesitated. "At least allow me to stay in touch." Daniel reached into his pocket and took out the small notebook he had been writing in earlier. He tore out a page. On it he wrote only one thing. "Daniel Carter, proud dad." He handed it to her with a friendly grin. Then he stood as the plane landed. Passengers slowly began exiting. Margaret was briefly delayed speaking with the flight crew. By the time she stepped into the terminal, Daniel Carter had disappeared into the crowd. No business card. No phone number. No request for reward. Just a quiet act of kindness, and a father heading home to his son. Weeks passed. Margaret returned to her busy world of boardrooms and skyscrapers. But something about that moment on the plane stayed with her. The calm voice. The steady kindness. The humility. One evening, she sat in her office long after everyone else had gone home. She opened the folded notebook page again. Daniel Carter, proud dad. She smiled. Then she asked her assistant to begin searching. It took nearly a month. But eventually they found him. Daniel Carter. A new maintenance supervisor at a small manufacturing plant in Ohio. Margaret did something unusual. She didn't send lawyers or business offers. Instead, she drove there herself. One quiet afternoon, Daniel was leaving work when a black car pulled into the parking lot. Margaret stepped out. Daniel looked surprised. "Well," he said with a warm smile. "Looks like you found me." Margaret laughed softly. "Yes, eventually." They stood there for a moment in the golden afternoon sunlight. "I wanted to thank you properly," she said again. Daniel shook his head gently. "You already did." "How?" she asked. "You're standing here smiling," he said. "That's enough." Margaret looked thoughtful. "Do you know what I realized after that flight?" she said. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "That the world doesn't really change because of billion-dollar decisions," she continued. "It changes because ordinary people choose kindness, even when nobody is watching." Daniel smiled. "Lucas says something like that too." Margaret laughed. "I think I'd like to meet this wise young man someday." Daniel nodded warmly. "I think he'd like that." The evening sun dipped slowly toward the horizon. And for a quiet moment, two very different lives stood side by side, connected by something simple, something timeless. A small act of kindness in the sky. And the gentle reminder that sometimes the most important people in the world are the ones who never ask to be noticed.